Want to welcome you to another episode of Mindset Growth Podcast. I'm Gary Bontrager, your host today. I have Ray Gage sitting in as a co-host, and we have a very interesting topic we're going to talk about.
Life comes from you, not at you.
Life comes from you, not at you. Ray is a bit of an expert about this. He's put a lot of time and thought into it. So I'm going to refer to you, Ray, to give us an initial thought process behind that statement.
Right, sure. So actually what I tell people is if I forget this, I get up to speak in front of a group and I ask everybody who wants to know what the secret of living a more successful, happy life, less stress is. And everybody raises their hand. I said, okay, I'm going to tell you that today, but I'm not going to tell you to the end. So who wants to volunteer to remind me if I forget? So nobody's ever forgotten that, right? So I actually forget on purpose, which isn't really forgetting, right? Just to see if they will raise their hand and say, hey, wait a minute, you forgot to tell us the secret of success. And so, and what I've learned is that there really is a secret of success. And that is understanding that my life comes from me, not at me. And so there's a lot of ways that you can use to describe it, but it's just thinking about this. I start with what I call, and I've heard people talk about it in different ways, but the things that make us the same, right? As human beings, we have a tendency to look at someone else and immediately see what is different about them, right? And then we start to make judgments about them based on what we see.
Right.
When the reality is there's really only one thing that makes you different from me. There's more things that make us the same. I mean, if you think about it, right? So every human being has the ability to think. Now, I'm not talking about how well they do at the thinking or whether or not you agree with their thinking, but we all have the ability.
They have that reasoning in their mind, and they can make processes of judgments and things.
Right. The second one is that we, and you can say this however you want to, but I like that we're all alive for the same reason. And that means that the life force that animates you is the same life force that animates me.
Right.
Every person who's ever lived on the face of this earth is alive now or will be alive in the future is not going to be alive for a different reason. It's going to be the same life force that animates them.
Right.
You can call it what you want. I call it God,
right.
But you can call it what you want. It doesn't matter what you call it. It's the same thing that makes you alive, that makes me alive. And the third thing is we all have consciousness or awareness.
Yes.
And even if you only think of it as like I'm conscious or aware that I think, and I'm conscious or aware that I'm alive, those three things are true about every single person on the face of the earth. The thing that makes us different is our experience of the things that make us the same. So think about that for a second, right?
I am.
So if I was born as you,
right,
and lived every second of your life the same way that you experienced it, I'd be you.
Right.
I wouldn't be me. I'd be you.
Because you'd have my experiences, which would create those reactions.
But now, when I look at somebody else and I see, okay, they're a different color, they're a different race, they're a different height, they're a different gender, they're a different whatever, I'm looking at what I can see on the outside.
Right.
I'm only thinking about that. But what I don't understand is that on the inside, if I'm not consciously thinking about it, if I'm not aware of what I'm thinking, I'm judging that person based on things that have nothing to do with who they really are.
Right.
And so as a human race, we do this, and a lot of it is propagated by our reliance on things like social media. Right. I mean, what you see as someone's public persona is not who they are.
Right.
I'm putting the vacation pictures out there, the pictures of the kids. You're not going to see the crap,
Right.
right? You're only going to see the stuff I want you to see, right? I mean, you think about
that's why it's so shocking sometimes when you find out what was really going on
really
behind
going
the
on.
scenes, because they've masked it so well.
And then you even think about like influencers, right? So there's so many people that were influencers on social media that have taken their own lives.
Right.
Well, from the outside looking in, or looking at them from my perspective, I'm seeing it like, and my kids, the people that they're influencing are seeing them as they're the shit, right? They're the person that I want to be. Otherwise they wouldn't be able to be an influencer, right? They're able to get people to buy products or to do something different. And then they turn around and they're like, you find out they took their own life.
I think of Robin Williams a lot when that conversation comes up, because he was one of the funniest comedians in so many good movies, liked by everybody. And a statement he made a short time before he passed was, the loneliest place on earth is to be surrounded by people, but being alone.
Mm-hmm.
And he had family, he had all kinds, but something inside of him made him feel so alone. And probably because he appeared to be so well liked and popular, people didn't support him and maybe give him, obviously he didn't feel nurtured the way he needed to, because he ended up taking his life.
Right. And I'm not sitting here today trying to say that, this is the solution to every problem.
No.
But this is understanding that my life is coming from me is going to help me relate to myself better, but then it's also going to help me relate to other people better. So when I say that whole story we're talking about, right? It's like I look at someone who has something that I would like to have, or they've accomplished something that I have as a goal to accomplish in my life. And I think to myself, they really must have it all going on, right? What I don't realize is that they're looking at someone else and thinking the same thing. There's someone else that has something that they want. There's someone else who has achieved something that they want to achieve. I'm looking at them as having arrived, and they're not looking at themselves that way. They're looking at someone else the same way that I'm looking at them. And that's because we judge our insides by other people's outsides.
Repeat that.
I judge my insides by your outsides.
Correct.
And that's because that's the only way I have to do it, unless I choose to start to look at it differently.
The reason I want that driven home, it's what creates so many false narratives in our own mind about other people and ourselves. And back to the original statement of life coming from us, not what's happening to us, is based off of that. And we're in a very interesting society with technology and social media, which I think a lot of people have this distorted view that it's all coming at them, and they're trying to filter and take what they feel is going to benefit them, when we've all probably heard the statement, we want to be the person that's a life giver, not a life taker. I mean, I've told my kids that often. Be the person that makes it better. Don't be the person that just takes and takes. And I think that distinction comes right back to what you're talking about, because we're focusing and watching everybody else. You're watching all these influencers on social media, and it's looking like, what can I get from it? But if you're the one that's making somebody else's day better, making their day brighter, it's a total different transformation.
Exactly. Yeah, 100% true. And it's if you do that, then you're starting to understand that if your life is coming from you, then you can also give, that's what you're giving to other people. So I can't show up for you any better than I can show up for me.
Right.
There's just no way. It's not going to happen. So,
but it's where your focus is.
But it's where your
focus
focus is.
That starts to shift that.
Right. Separately, I'm Gage.
And I'm Bontrager.
Together, we are Gage Bontrager Consulting.
We work on changing your mindset,
Developing leaders,
building systems and processes
helping you grow personally and professionally
to achieve the success that you want personally and professionally.
however you choose to define success for you.
Reach out to us and follow us on social media or look us up on the website, and that will put you on a path to achieve what is missing in your life.
Thanks for watching this episode of Mindset Growth Podcast.
So one example I had years ago when I started my personal growth journey and really didn't even, in the beginning, somebody asked me, oh, you want a self-help book? I didn't know what self-help was. And it was as that journey started. One thing I started to do is try to search somebody out who was elderly that didn't have maybe much family that ever checked on them. And I tried to be there for them, whether it was, an elderly neighbor couple, somebody in a nursing home that you'd go visit once or twice a month. But what happened out of that experience that I will now probably continue for the rest of my life is I got so much more out of it. And I learned so much about history of not only about their life and what they experienced, but culture, where they grew up, what the early 1900s was like, an era I never lived, but these people give it to you. And, they're so relational because they don't have very many people that check in on them. And that was one example of me giving life that has been so beneficial to me because it took my focus off myself. And it just it didn't take a lot of time because it'd be real easy to spend that extra 30 minutes just sitting in an easy chair. But to stop and visit somebody for 30 minutes once or twice a month, my gosh, it'll turn into more than 30 minutes because it's so rewarding, but you're taking the focus, you're giving life to somebody else. I think that's what you're talking about for one example, for a physical example.
But when you do that, right, you're in that moment, you're making a conscious decision. And I encourage people to do this when they're feeling badly, right? Go find someone that you can help.
Right.
Because you're making it about someone else, but when you're making it all about them, you get the reward too.
Right.
So it's all about them, but it's also all about you.
Right.
So, and you're changing that narrative then, and understanding that your life is coming from you because you're giving, but as you give, you're getting.
Exactly.
So, but now if I'm giving from the place where I'm feeling badly, all I can give is feeling badly.
Right.
So, other ways to look at this or think about it is like if you stop and think about it, if you don't stop and think about it, you're never going to stop and think about it, right? So you have to stop and think about it.
Right. That's where medication in your day becomes important.
Yeah, exactly. But if you look at the way that people look at things differently, and that's a perception thing, right? So my perception is different than your perception, but my perception is different because my experience is different.
Right.
So my perception is shaped by my experience.
Right.
So if I experience like the city differently than you do, I might love the city and you might hate the city.
You're pretty right about that.
Right. So, but that's an example, right? It's just because I accept something that I experience. Like you love, there's people that love to hunt.
Right.
I don't love to hunt.
Right.
I never had the experience that created that. And you did.
Right.
So, that's what that means. When you think about it, you're like, oh, my life really does come from me, not at me. And it's the choice to how you want to look at it, right? So you might have something new come into your life, and your initial reaction or response is you don't like it, but then you take the time to learn more about it, and you realize, oh, this could be fun, right? Or this could be an exciting thing to try,
right?
And then you try it, and then you fall in love with it. It's a new thing for you, right? Because now your experience is different. You were open to changing your experience about it, and now you love it.
Right.
So your perception of it also changed because now your experience of it changed. It was your experience of it that changed your perception. That's because life comes from you, not at you.
So to summarize, if you're going to give somebody a brief, just if they want to start, processing this, can you give us a quick summary as we wrap this up? I mean, I know we went into more depth, but can you give them I should maybe not say a summary as much as a couple of steps to start to understand this concept?
Sure. So one thing that is just to stop and start paying attention and look for going back to the explorer thing, right? So think about it like an explorer, like, hey, where does this show up for me and how does this show up for me? Because there's things that you love to do that other people despise. Right. There's things that you despise doing that other people love.
Right.
And that's not a right or a wrong thing.
Right.
And it's not wrong that people love to hunt and I don't.
Right.
Right. So that's not the actual activity. So start paying attention to that. Right. So what are examples of how that shows up in your life? And it'll probably surprise you when you realize how much of your life is that.
Right.
And those are just choices that you made based off of the experience that you had of the things that make you the same as the person who loves the thing that you don't like.
Right.
So that's really the biggest thing, I think, is an eye-opener for people, is to just stop and start to think about those things and look for those examples.
One thing I noticed too that was real easy for me as a younger person was thinking that my experiences justified my reactions, and that it also then went as far as to the way I respond and the way I do things is right. And it might just be kind of a mentality of a younger person. But I think when you stop, like you said, and start to figure this out, all of a sudden you realize it's not a matter of right or wrong. It's a matter of being effective in understanding we live in a bigger world than ours.
Yeah.
And that how do we contribute and help and support other people? And when you do that, the reward we receive is always greater than what it is if we're just trying to serve ourselves and take life in once we're starting to give life away. So,
right. And a lot of people, if you want to go deeper with it, then start to think about it. When you start to realize what those things are, then start to ask yourself, are any of these things actually limiting me?
Right.
Like, are they keeping me stuck in a place that I don't like? Because if they are, I can change that. I'm the one that gets to make the choice of changing those things, not someone else. So I can decide then, hey, you know what? All of my friends hunt. I don't get to spend that time with them because I don't. Maybe I should try hunting, right? Well, so I'm just keep using that as an example, but I mean but how many things like that happen for you in your life, and what are you missing out on? That's not a matter of right or wrong.
Well, it's a whole nother episode, but this thing of limiting belief is a big deal. Mm-hmm. And it's usually the box that we create ourselves in that limits our belief. And that's a whole nother episode. And
then the last thing I would say is really start to think about what would our world look like? Ask yourself this question. What does your world look like if you can start to look at other people and see them as the same as you before you see what you think is different?
Right. Not make those early judgment calls and form opinions before they had the opportunity to interact and get to know them, because once you know their story and with the files they're pulling from, you're going to have a different perspective anyway. But I want to thank you for joining us on this episode of Mindset Growth Podcast. I hope it challenged you to think about yourself differently and how you contribute to life and what you give to the world you live in and make a difference in your everyday. Thank you, and see you on the other side.